All right, so our lecture for this first week is going to be a discussion of the sheep industry and an overview of the history and the future trends for our industry. We're going to summarize the history, both globally in the US and in California. We're going to assess the current status of the industry, and then talk about different production systems. And this week it's going to be a mix of some voiceover PowerPoints, and we do have a live webinar on Wednesday with Dr. Wes Patton, which will also cover some of the history and the current status of the industry. As we look at images through time, sheep have always been present. They were actually one of the first animals to be domesticated somewhere around 10,000 BC near Mesopotamia in the Middle East. And the beauty of sheep that's unlike a lot of other livestock is they're raised for meat, fiber, and milk. So there's like a triple function. A lot of times we hear of dual purpose livestock. Sheep actually have a triple purpose. And so by domesticating them, that allowed for civilizations to spread a bit to traditionally colder climates, because they discovered that the fiber, which we call wool, could actually be a warm garment at some point and be able to allow them to survive in colder climates. Generally in North America, sheep arrived on the second voyage of Columbus, and along around the mid-1600s, a wool mill got established in Massachusetts, which started increasing the need for more sheep, more wool to produce textiles. And eventually, like everything else in the United States history, westward expansion happened. Sheep started to move into the western U.S. and moved with the settlers across the country. For the U.S., the peak numbers happened in the 1940s, right around World War II. Lamb production was at an all-around high. Wool production was at an all-around high. The U.S. Army or military forces, all uniforms were made with wool. Lamb was a common protein seen on the plates of a lot of the U.S. citizens. But then after the war, we saw a drastic decline in the amount of livestock, or the amount of sheep and lambs available in the U.S. And there's several factors that all went into play to drive this downward. Once the war was over, the demand for wool dropped off, as well as the increasing development of synthetic fabrics that all contributed to the American society having less demand for wool. When the military came back from World War II, they'd eaten lamb, not cooked really well, for a long, long time. And so there's a generation that didn't want anything to do with lamb. And as a result, it's created a subsequent generation that didn't really want anything to do with lamb, so on and so forth. But we are starting to see lamb consumption level off and actually start to rise again, as it's becoming a fresh meat for people to bring into their diets. Immigration challenges. Finding dependable herders, especially in the range flocks, is a huge issue. And it's been an issue for a lot of years, but even now, it's one of the major issues the sheep industry is facing. Right after World War II, there was an increased competition for use of public lands. Grazing permit costs skyrocketed, and so that caused several producers to not maintain or stay in the sheep business, diversify into some other things at that time. Predators are huge, wild and domestic. And actually the domestic dog, when it learns how to hunt and kill sheep, it's one of the worst predators out there. And this can count for about 15% of a producer's production costs, second only to feed. It's huge. It's a big drain. It's something that we monitor quite a bit, because at the sheep unit we don't have large guard dogs or anything. And so if we do start seeing coyote kills at the sheep unit, we immediately call the county trapper and set up a plan and protocol to try to limit any more losses. After World War II, there was a wool subsidy program for a while. That got pulled away from, government decided not to allocate money towards wool subsidies anymore, thus hurting the wool industry even further. Farmers diversified into other areas, which is actually really smart. You need to have be able to account for various forms of cash flow. If all your eggs are in one basket and that industry crashes, you're left holding a basket, an empty basket. And so they did diversify into other areas. The product, lamb itself, tends to be seasonal in demand, like around the holidays, Easter. So that's a bit of a challenge, as well as profitability. We're going to wrap up this first video with that discussion of what's kind of the history, and now we're going to move into where the industry is located.